Welcome to Board Game Brawl. My name is Nick, and today we're taking a look at Scoundrels of Skullport, which is the first expansion for Lords of Waterdeep. Now, Lords of Waterdeep came out in 2012, and it just hit with a boom and made a huge crater in the gaming landscape. Trust me, that's a good analogy. It was just immensely popular. Everyone was playing it to the point of fatigue almost. It won the Origins Award this year, and probably for good reason because of how popular and accessible it is. See, this is a very introductory worker placement game, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's got that Dungeons & Dragons theme, thinly pasted on, but it's enough to get people into more hardcore board gaming, and that's a good thing. But you know, I said fatigue before, and that's because people played this so much that it got to be a little tiresome for even people that really liked or loved it. And it just because it needed more variety. So everyone was eagerly awaiting this expansion that I hold in my very hands. And this is actually two expansions in one box. You have Undermountain and Skullport. And they're mostly the same, although Skullport adds a new mechanic. So is all of this going to be enough to actually revitalize the game and get people who liked it before back into it and bring new people into the fold, perhaps? Well, I've played it a couple times, and we're going to take a look at all of the new components, and then I'll tell you what I think. So I'm not going to go over the base rules of Lords of Waterdeep again. If you want an overview of that, you can go check out my review of the game. I'm going to do this review as if, assuming that you actually know the rules and that you've played Lords of Waterdeep before, and just show you what new stuff the expansion has to offer. So first and foremost, there is a new faction, the Grey Hands, who is basically just another player color choice. You have the little gray meeples, or I'm sorry, agents instead, and all the little components that you need for him or her. Now, there are actually two modules in the Skulls of Skullport expansion. You have Undermountain and Skullport. So, Undermountain is pretty basic, and you've got a board here that you're going to place next to the normal Lords of Waterdeep board that has 3 extra spaces for you to go. Nothing too flashy. You go here, you're to the Grim Statue, you're going to get 2 entry cards. Go to the entry wall, you're going to get a quest and play an entry card, which is a nice alternative to Waterdeep Harbor. And the Hall of Mirror gives you a cube of your choice, or an orange and a black. I should also mention that the game comes with, because there are going to be a lot more resources needing to be floated around with the possible addition of a 6th player, that you now have these little chips that will count as 5 of a given resource. So you have 4 of these for every different color of resource. The other stuff that's in Undermountain, so you have some new lords. So you have Danilo here, who is actually just going to give you, at the end of the game, 3 points for every non-mandatory quest that you have. So less points than some of the other lords get, but you get them for every single type of quest. You've got good old Hallister, the Lord of Undermountain, who is going to give you bonus points for all the particular Undermountain cards, quests, and buildings that you have in play under your control. And this guy, Thorbrian, who is really powerful, who is going to give you 5 bonus points for every quest you complete that's already worth 10 or more points. So rich get richer. Some of the new quests, all the quests in Undermountain are all about bigger and better. So this quest here, the Threaten the Builders Guild, takes a lot of resources to complete, and you only get 13 points, but you put every building in Builders Hall into play under your control, which is huge. This one here is going to give you 15 points, and you are going to be able to reassign your agents when you complete it, which can be tremendous bonus. And you've got a lot of quests that are going to give you a certain amount of points, but if you're willing to spend more cubes, more resources, I should say, you're going to get even more points. So you can get 12 or 22 with this card, depending on what you want to spend. And then you've just got some cards that just give you a straight up crap ton of points, like 40 points, which is just a lot. That's a lot of resources, but that's a lot of points. And that's what Undermountain is, bigger and better. So some of the intrigue cards, a lot have to do with taking a lot of resources, but then putting some out for everyone. Like, take 2 black cubes from the supply, and then put a black cube from the supply onto 2 different other spaces. Anyone who lands on those spaces gets those cubes. This is a crazy powerful card, the Open Lord. Whoever plays this card actually reveals their lord for the rest of the game to the other players, but then also becomes immune to all the attack effects, including mandatory quests, of other players, forever. There's a lot of cards like this where you're going to give another player a resource or currency or something and then immediately score a bunch of bonus points for yourself. And a good old fireball on the demolish card, which will actually destroy an opponent's building and let you put another building in its spot under your control, which is crazy powerful. So there's also some buildings in Undermountain, which basically do the same stuff as the intrigue cards. Take a bunch of cubes, but then seed the board with more cubes. Money, same thing. Take some money, put some more money on the board for other players to grab. This one's kind of cool. It lets you put remove cubes of your choice from the game and seed them out on the board, but then score 10 points. And just another intrigue card playing tile. This one you can grab an adventure of your choice and play an intrigue card, which could be nice. Now Skullport adds another player board, just like the Undermountain, but it also adds a new resource called Corruption. So I'll show you this board first, and you notice that these spots are really powerful. You take 2 orange cubes, 2 black cubes, and what's that skull? Well, that's Corruption. Same thing down here. You're going to get 2 cubes of your choice. Well, that could be huge, but you also take a Corruption. Up here, a quest, an intrigue, 5 gold, and a Corruption. So what is this Corruption? Well, you have this Corruption track down here, and I've already set it up, so I can't really show you, but it has all these little skull markers seated on the board. And every space here goes -1, -2, -3, all the way down to -9. Well, what does that mean? Well, like I said, like I showed you before, some of the spaces on the Skullport board are, and some of the quests and some of the intrigue cards are going to force you to take Corruption. It always starts with 1 Corruption on the -1 space, and all the rest have 3. When a space is completely uncovered, that means that Corruption markers are going to be worth that amount of negative points at the end of the game. You're putting this Corruption in your tavern, and it's going to sit there like evil lumps of coal. And if they're still in your tavern at the end, you're scoring that many negative points. Whatever open space furthest down the track is open. So if you go all the way down, if all this Corruption is removed all the way down to -6, and you've got 3 pieces of Corruption in your tavern, you're taking -18 points at the end of the game. So that can be a bit of a deterrent to keep you from taking too many of those powerful spaces. But let's look at some of the other cards. So this module also comes with new lords. So Irzul here is kind of generic in the sense that at the end of the game you get to just choose a quest type of your choice, and you're going to score bonus points for every card of that quest that you have, which can be actually pretty useful if you just have if you don't have the type of quest that you would normally need for some of the other lords. This guy is the equivalent of the Hallister Blackcloak, except for Skullport. You're going to score bonus points for all of the Skullport types of cards that you've managed to score. And the Xanathar, who actually gets bonus points for all the Corruption he has in his tavern at the end of the game, although he still takes negative points for that Corruption as well. So this is more of an offset, not a bonus. The quest cards, of course, all have to do with Corruption. This card doesn't take very many resources to complete this quest, and you score a lot of points and some resources, but you have to take Corruption. Same thing here, very powerful. You get to put out buildings basically for free, except that you're taking Corruption. But there are stuff that lets you return Corruption. So if you complete this quest, you're going to return 3 skulls to the track from in ascending order. So it'll fill up at least 1 space on the track that's been empty. This quest actually removes Corruption from the game. It takes the Corruption from your tavern and removes it from the game. That means it's never added back to the track. So the other players who still have a lot of Corruption could be in a lot of trouble because the threshold is going to stay at a certain point. The intrigue cards also have to do with Corruption. This one gives you 4 cubes, but you have to take a Corruption. Other players also have the option of taking cubes and Corruption. This one makes you take Corruption, but you get to put a building out for free, or actually put a building that another opponent has under your control, which is even better. This one I really like a lot. Release the Hounds just removes 3 Corruption from the Corruption track. So players who have a lot of Corruption really hate it when this card comes out. And good old Doppelganger, you choose another opponent who has an agent out and has more Corruption than you, and you can basically use that space as if you had an agent on it. So that's a fun card. So that's basically Scoundrels of Skullport. Lots of over-the-top cards from Undermountain and a lot of corruption cards from Skullport. So that's Scoundrels of Skullport, and I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. If you didn't like Lords of Waterdeep before, this expansion is not going to change your mind. Yes, it adds a lot of variety to the base game, and it does add one new mechanic in the form of that corruption, and that's all very interesting. But it doesn't change what Lords of Waterdeep is, and that's a basic worker placement game with the Dungeons & Dragons theme pasted on. And I've said that over and over again, but that's the truth. I mean, that's what this game is. And there's a lot of people that didn't like that and don't like it, especially in my gaming group. Even hardcore Euro gamers in my group just didn't care for Lords of Waterdeep. It wasn't deep enough. It had too many kind of mess with you cards. And so those people are not going to get into it, and they're not going to get back into it because of this expansion. Now, that sounds really negative. But the fact of the matter is, I actually like this expansion a lot. And if you like, but that's because I like Lords of Waterdeep. And if you like Lords of Waterdeep, if you love Lords of Waterdeep, this is going to be a must-buy for you. Because it adds so much variety to the game that just wasn't there before. Now, because it doesn't change the base game in any kind of fundamental way, you could say, well, you're probably going to get burned out on this too. Well, maybe. But I think there's some really interesting things here that they could definitely build upon with future expansions. The primary one is that corruption track. That's the one really new mechanic to this game, and I do really like it. It adds this interesting little push your luck twist to the game. Do I get these really powerful effects from the Skullport board and these new Skullport buildings and go for these quests that give a lot of points and resources but give so much corruption? Do I go for that, or do I hold off? Am I going to be able to draw those other quests and complete those other quests that take away corruption and land on the buildings that take away corruption? Are those even going to come up? This is all the push your luck there. But what I like about it the most is that it's not just push your luck for you, it's for everyone. It's this community pool of corruption that everyone has to watch, even the people that don't actually take corruption. We had a game where one of the guys decided, I don't want that corruption. I can win without this. And he was constantly having to watch that corruption track because as the rest of us kept piling up the corruption, he was trying his best to see that the spaces on the corruption track were down farther and farther and farther, so that all that corruption that we took was worth more and more and more negative points. And he was just rubbing his hands together like, yes, yes, wallow in the corruption. And then, of course, we started completing quests that took away corruption and put it back on the board, and he tried to play cards that would remove corruption permanently from the game. It was just this awesome little back and forth. So I really like the corruption mechanic. It's probably going to be the selling point of this expansion for a lot of people. The other stuff from the Skullport side of the expansion, I mean, you know, all of it has to do with the corruption. So it's either going to be take it or leave it on that. So you can't even mix in one of the lords, the Xanathar, because it doesn't make any sense. It only has to do with corruption. Along with one of the other lords, the Skullport lord, who only gets points for the Skullport cards. But the other lord I actually really like a lot in Skullport. I forget her name, I'm sorry, I don't know any of their names, I'm terrible about that. But she actually can pick a type of quest at the end of the game and score bonus points for that. Whereas a lot of the other lords from the base game had two particular types of quests that they scored bonus points for, except for the builder. Everyone hates the builder, but she gets to choose, which is really great because sometimes you have a lord that only gets points for arcane and piety, and you get stuck with warfare and commerce at the beginning of the game with your random draw of quests. And then you're playing catch-up already to other players who might have got just the quests that they needed. So I really like that lord. So on the Undermountain side of things, you know, that's really the least, I'm going to say it's the least interesting part of this expansion. It does add a lot of new stuff, cards, tiles, and lords that are going to be really nice to have just to add that extra variety. But again, it doesn't change the game in fundamental ways. You have these quests that are just worth a ton of points, but they're not really interesting. And actually, it makes some of the quests from the base game that only give you like 25 points for the same amount of resources that you need for 40 points. It makes those quests completely obsolete. I would actually even say take them out unless you just like the fact that one player might get hosed by drawing one of those quests instead of the really good ones. The new buildings that let you take a lot of cool resources but have to seed the board with more resources or gold. Nah, I mean, it's interesting. It didn't really have an effect on us because we would just put the extra resources on spaces that have already been taken. if that's how it came up, in which case they just sat there until the next time, and everyone kind of forgets about them. They weren't really a game changer. The new lords that come on the Undermountain side, well, 2 of them I would actually say are can be pretty useful. One of them that is actually, I would say, overpowered, especially if you're using all the Undermountain stuff. The guy who gives you 5 extra points for every quest you completed with that counted for 10 or more points. That's like the rich getting richer for sure. I really like the guy who you get 3 points just for every non-mandatory quest you have. So, like I said before, this mitigates having a bunch of different types of quests and not the kind you would normally need for a lord to get points. Now you just get slightly less points, but for all of your quests, which I think could be huge. I haven't played as him yet, but I would really like to. We haven't done the 6-player. We only played with up to 5 people. I don't know. I don't think it would change the game in a drastic way, except to make it longer. Although I will say that the long game, quote unquote, with both modules wasn't too long. I would actually make the argument that people who said that, oh, the base game Lords of Waterdeep, you can do that in 60 minutes, they're lying. Or they're doing it with 2 to 4 players, and they're just doing it boom, 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 boom. They've played it millions of times. So I would say the standard game of the base Lords of Waterdeep was at least 90 minutes. With both modules, it only went up to about 2.5 hours with us. Then we got it down to 2 for our second play. Not a big deal, but I don't think the 6-player is necessary. It won't change the game experience. So that's Scoundrels of Skullport. And like I said, if you already liked the game or love the game, this is probably going to be a must-buy for you. It doesn't change the game in fundamental ways, but it adds so much more variety and depth to it that you really need it. If you didn't like Lords of Waterdeep before, keep looking. Maybe go check out Edo with a Y, Y-E-D-O, because that's supposed to be the Lords of Waterdeep killer. I haven't had a chance to try that yet, but this is not going to change your mind. But Lords of Waterdeep lovers, you're going to be in heaven with this mod. So, if to use a D&D term, mod. But this has been Board Game Brawl. My name is Nick, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.